I think it's not the fragrance, but most mainstream big industries have mass-produced stuff with just enough toxins to be legal. I tend to be somewhat agreeable with what you're saying. I think, unfortunately, fragrances right now and fragrance materials tend to be the default scapegoat for a lot of this talk about toxins. You know, it's cyclical. Every so often it keeps coming back. But when you really think of the amount of fragrances that are in a perfume, it's very, very little. And I don't think that causality, the association has ever been actually demonstrated and proven. And I sometimes wonder, are we pointing the finger at the wrong place? Because, if we think of the big picture, are the small amounts of fragrances that we actually are in contact with, are they worse than, spending our days in a city full of, cars where we're burning gas and petrol? Is it worse than the paint that we put in our walls? Is it worse than, the ink that are in our clothes that are touching our bodies day in and day out? As a perfumer, I wouldn't be too worried personally about, and if you refer to my previous video where I'm talking about, perfumers being at the front of this, where we're in contact with the raw material day in and day out, and yet we don't have these patterns of people actually being sick. It would be reported throughout the industry, which is not the case. So I'm wondering if we're sort of pointing the fingers too hastily at fragrances because it's just easy when we're missing out on a lot of other places where we should be looking first. So again, like the inks on our clothes, the type of material, am I wearing polyester, which is a petrol-driven, basically plastic on your skin. And if we are talking about fragrances, I don't think it's necessarily the niche fragrances or the fragrances that we buy in pharmacies. I would be looking more towards like the exactly what you're saying, the big industries, more like detergents where we're using tons of galaxolide, and we still don't know exactly what that amount of galaxolide used over decades that we now find in nature, what that will actually do in the human body and do in the grand scale of things. So those would actually be the places I would be looking. And me as a perfumer, these are some choices that I have made. For example, when I know that there's a molecule that's ubiquitous, much like galaxolide, that has been used for decades in detergent, I kind of take that out of my materials that I use, just because there are a lot of questions there. I think we're very close to that with Iso E Super because it's just so omnipresent as well. Like I think at some point we're going to start wondering about that one as well. But anyways, long story short, I do feel that perfumes in general tend to be thrown under the bus really too hastily, and I feel it's a little bit unfair. And I'm not saying that the industry of perfumery is completely innocent from all of it, because anything that is produced at high quantities can become problematic in the long run. But I do feel that it too easily becomes the scapegoat for these arguments on toxins when there are so many other places that, in the grand scale of things, would be, for me, the first place I would start looking.